God bless fantasy football time, Waiver Wire Tuesday, alongside Sausha Durkan. I'm Andrew Rogers, and we are headed into Week 13. I can't believe it's already here. The season's essentially over at this point, and so are many fantasy football seasons. I am completely trying my hardest to get into the playoffs. Sausha, I need your help this week in order to do it. You are facing a team that has the same record as me in the God Bless Fantasy Football League. I'm in 7th place with a record of 6-6, which is kind of like the NFC South. And, the Falcons, Bucks leading the pack there. That's kind of our two teams.
There you go.
And as for, well, your team, they're struggling, but not to say your team couldn't beat Winers Take All. We're at the point in the season, though, Sausha, where there's 2 weeks left, 2 regular season weeks left. And as we talk about this matchup in particular, yours with Winers Take All in the God Bless Fantasy Football League, I have to take down Schick and Nick, the two infamous ESPN and Fox Sports broadcasters.
Who I just got my rear end handed to me by last week.
Can we not go off, guys, this next week? Just throw me a bone, right?
I blame it on the holiday weekends. I did not check until it was too late, and I was like, oh, well, JK. One of my starting wide receivers out.
Did anybody talk smack to you this week? That's the real question.
No, and you know what's interesting about that, as we were discussing before we started recording this podcast, Austin Plurde has not said a word to me because I think he feels so bad that I've gotten my ass spanked for 3 weeks.
You know
straight.
what? I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it. Austin is riding high in first place, a record of 10-2, a phenomenal season for him. And he talked a big game coming into the fantasy draft, and rightfully so, because he is rocking it. But guess what? Once the playoffs roll around, anything can happen. And I can be the first one to tell you that I've gone into the playoffs in first place numerous times.
Yeah.
Numerous. First, second place, and I've ended in 4th.
Hey.
Because my team just doesn't perform in the playoffs.
Better
so
watch out.
Just, Austin,
Santa
when you're
Claus
listening, I know you're probably smiling right now, maybe laughing a little bit. Maybe you're pumping iron at the gym because I see you at Planet Fitness every now and then. But just know, once the playoffs roll around, it's not always sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows. And here's why I'm bringing this up, because the team in last place, Sasha's been claiming this entire day that she's in last place.
I've been trying really hard to be in last place.
But she's not. There is one team below her, and that's the team of Malia and Amanda, and their team's 1-11 on the year. Where did that one win come? That is kind of like the $1 million question, because they've had 3 players in their IR most of the year in their starting lineup. Safe to say, with Malia out on a cruise ship, she's not checking. Or a yacht, I should say, not a cruise ship. That could be a cruise ship too, who knows? Yeah. But where did that one win come? So I was curious to just go back and look, because I'm like, gosh, I can't imagine being the team that lost to this team.
Yeah.
And sure enough, 50 Shades of Trey, the first place team. One of your 2 losses came to the worst team in the league. In the week that it happened, they started 2 players in the IR, Javonte Williams and Darren Waller.
Wow.
Can you believe that?
That sucks.
That shocked me.
That's terrible.
Shocked me.
Should have planned better.
But that just goes to show that no matter the week, your team could not perform.
Yeah.
Like, even if you feel you are set up, you are golden, it may not work for you.
Yeah.
So there's
100%.
always worry once you get into the fantasy playoffs. And I know that we are attributing a lot of this to the God Bless Fantasy Football League, as this is the God Bless Fantasy Football podcast. But I know you are probably in a league out there right now listening and thinking, this could be me.
Yeah.
This
might
could be me.
Desperate, which you will be able to pick up by my waiver wire picks of the week. 1, it's thin. 2, a lot of, especially your quarterback, wide receiver, running back, you've probably already established those. If you haven't started stashing people by now, it may not be the greatest strategy, but taking that into consideration, and then also thinking about what we mentioned last week on this podcast, you're looking at matchups. almost all of these players on my list have to do with the matchup.
And I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Now, before we get into those players, I will give a quick teaser for future shows. Now, playoffs. Week 15, 16, and 17 for most, if not all leagues. Because of that, and because of the uncertainty of knowing if your team's in the playoffs with what player, this is how we decided to attack the rest of the year. We will do our normal shows all the way up to the end of week 14, and then we will do one special playoff edition episode that will cover the first week of playoffs. Because, like I said, who knows? None of these players may be talked about because you may have missed the playoffs.
Right.
But we will do one playoff show that will take us into the rest of the season. So, what's that? If we do math right.
2 more weeks?
6 shows? 6 more shows?
Okay. Yeah, you're right.
Because we have
math.
2 Sunday shows. Counting this week. Oh, that's not even true. 5 shows, right?
Yes.
Because we have 1 Sunday show, a Tuesday, a Sunday. And then, no, we'll do 4 more shows because we won't do a waiver wire show going into,
that's true.
Going into the playoffs. So 4 more shows coming your way. If I did the math wrong, well, that's because I'm not a math major. But what I can tell you that I majored in is fantasy football. And let's get into that right now. Sausha, kick us off. First quarterback that you like.
I'm going to put the more hilarious one on here first.
The more hilarious, yet probably less hilarious at the same time.
Yes, it makes sense this week, and I'm going to tell you why. Kenny Pickett, pick him up. I understand that he's had a pretty rocky, to say the least, rookie season. He completed 20 of 28 for 174 in the Steelers' win over the Colts. He had added 6 carries for 32 yards on the ground and had a handful of errant throws that averaged only about 6.2 yards per attempt. I get it. Sounds like crap, right? He did, however, have a handful of passes that were, either dropped, whatever. However, the Steelers are facing Atlanta this week, whose pass defense is ranked 3rd to last, so 29th, in all of the NFL. Gives them a high ceiling this week.
Yeah, good matchup play there. I think another just overall good quarterback play. If you are in need of just picking up somebody, and I watched him dust the Bears last week out of nowhere, was Mike White. And Zach Wilson, he shouldn't start another game for the Jets this season.
No.
He just shouldn't. I've said this numerous times on my morning show, Coffee and Cream in the Morning with Damon Benning, but aside from the fact that he just looks like a spoiled, rotten brat on the sidelines.
He looks
somebody
like
that's
the
pouting.
elf that got kicked out of the North Pole.
He's a misfit toy.
Yes.
In that offense.
Yes.
He really is. And they cut to him early on in that game when Mike White was having success and he had his either hands in his pockets and he was just kind of hood up and looking
rosy
off.
cheeks. Snow on his
or he had his arms crossed. I can't remember exactly the pose that he was in, but he didn't look like he was in a happy state of mind. And if you get benched, you have to know that you can't be immature once you get to the NFL. You have to put your personal emotions aside and root for your team to win games, which is what the Jets did. And the Jets win games when you're not playing quarterback.
Sorry.
You would have beaten the Patriots. The Jets would have beaten the Patriots if Mike White would have started. But because Zach Wilson thinks he's the best thing since sliced bread and doesn't think that anybody can, he thinks he's untouchable, that anybody can take a step up above him on the depth chart, on the roster, it is why the Jets have lost most of their games this season once he returned from injury.
Yeah, totally agree.
In preseason, though, it looked like Zach Wilson was the guy. So I'm not going to just, totally poo-poo on Zach Wilson's parade. But at this point in the season, it's become obvious that you're an issue in the offense.
Yeah. And if you're going for a playoff run, I don't feel like the Jets can trust him.
And I wouldn't even trust Mike White. There are better quarterbacks out there that should already be on your team that I would start over Mike White weekly. But the Jets do find themselves in decent position down the stretch of the season. And because they play with good defense, it sets up for the quarterback to have more confidence.
Right. 1,000%. I have also got Mike White on here. If you hadn't heard, because it was all over the internet and Twitter because people were just absolutely shocked. He completed 22 of 28 for 315 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Bears, in case you missed the game. But the Vikings defense also just got destroyed by Mac Jones. So Vikings were allowing the 9th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks heading into that game over the last, I think it's 3 games. So it's a good matchup too.
As we move to running backs, my point of emphasis here is you don't also need to pick up a running back this week. And I'm going to name the 3 guys that you're probably watching, and I guarantee they probably pop up on Sasha's watch list too.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't need to snag these guys, and I'll tell you why. Benny Snell took over for Najee Harris on Monday Night Football. But the conversation right now is Jaylen Warren healthy enough to take over that backfield? Pretty much predicting that Najee Harris isn't ready to go yet.
Mm-hmm.
And if he's not, then Benny Snell will be the starter. But Benny Snell wasn't anything crazy on Monday Night Football either. The Steelers just aren't a very good run team. And Najee's numbers have taken a hit because of that. So don't act in maybe overreaction in a state of mind, in an overreactive state of mind, I should say, and just go and pick up Benny Snell, burn your waiver when, hey, potentially that waiver could be used once you get to the playoffs if somebody goes down. That's what I would recommend in that case. I'd also say in the case of Jermichael Hasty that Travis Etienne was ready to return against the Ravens, but they held him out because it just wasn't worth it to them to try to play him through an injury. They thought, hey, let's rest him up. Then we can go after Detroit. Somehow, some way, the Jaguars still found a way to win that football game without him. Mm-hmm. And because of that, it paid off immensely for Doug Peterson and the Jacksonville Jaguars. So even though Jermichael Hasty ate in relief with a lot of points coming on the receiving end, it's not worth it to me just yet to burn my waiver on him because of the reports coming out on ETN. And then finally, do what you want with the Rams backfield. You have KY Williams that led the team in carries, but you also have Cam Akers, who should be the bell cow running back for that team. That's what they drafted him to be. But it also seems like now they've checked out on him as their long-term solution at running back. I don't even know if the Rams like to run the football anymore. It doesn't help that Matt Stafford's been injured too. That Rams team is atrocious to watch. I just don't love anybody to burn my waiver on this week when it comes to running backs.
Yeah. I had Jermichael Hasty on here only because of the things that you mentioned. The other thing to remember too, when considering him, if you're in desperate mode, is that even if ETN comes back or doesn't, I had him, he's still listed as day-to-day, probably won't play through injury like you mentioned. And they also picked up Darrell Henderson Jr. Even if he's active, I think that they probably split. So I don't know. If you need somebody, I'd maybe burn a waiver on him, but that'd be like super desperate. The other running back I have on here is Jordan Mason. Elijah Mitchell is out for the rest of the season, regular season, I should say. That's important to note. And Christian McCaffrey.
Isn't it funny how Elijah Mitchell gets hurt again?
Yeah, it's not funny, but
that dude never can stay on. He can't stay on the football field, and people freaked out when he went off, and Christian McCaffrey wasn't doing as much with his carries. Yeah. And now look, all of a sudden Elijah Mitchell's hurt again. Yeah. Guys, you don't buy into the hype of Elijah Mitchell ever. Never draft him because he'll always end up on the injured reserve list.
He's a vase sitting on the corner of a table, just waiting to fall over.
And then here comes the bull in the china shop.
Exactly. Christian McCaffrey is also considered day-to-day at the moment. Mason could wind up starting this week. Even if McCaffrey is active, Mason is in line to see around 10 touches. Could be a good flex option, which is why I put him on here.
Yeah, McCaffrey has knee irritation. As Sasha said, day-to-day. You find yourself in a weird spot if you're a McCaffrey owner, because this is definitely somebody that you should add if you have McCaffrey on your team. But I also wouldn't waste roster space if you feel like you are losing value on somebody else just to add Mason. Now, reports have it that McCaffrey appears on track to play in week 13, but what Sasha was kind of alluding to is workload. when it boils down to it. May not be Mason starts, but it may be Mason gets 40% of the share, of the running back share. And that could be relevant when you're just looking for maybe a long shot flex play.
Me. I will do anything. I am the person in desperation mode, which has a lot to do, I feel like, weekly. The last 3 weeks at least. I've just Yep.
Who do you like at wide receiver?
Wide receiver, I have Zay Jones.
He's the only one I like this week.
Yeah.
Just so everybody knows that out there. He is the only person I like and would say, hey, yes to burn on.
The drawback, especially if you're in a standard league, or I guess particularly if you're in a standard league and your wide receivers are kind of touchdown dependent. He does have he had 11 catches last week, bumped his season total to team high of 58, but in all of those catches, he's only had 1 touchdown. Jones could have a nice opportunity to be in the end zone this week, though, against the Lions. Their defense, they're playing better. I get that, but they're allowing 28.2 points per game. They played better lately, but they're still in week 12. We're allowing the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers.
Real fast, before we move any further with Zay Jones, I want to go back to the Jets running back that took over for Michael Carter, because I know people out there are probably thinking, why didn't you say his name? So Zonovan Knight did take over for Carter when he got hurt, and he did explode in his debut. But again, Michael Carter is still carrying that questionable tag and should come back and play this week. So it's not going to be the night show.
Right.
And if it were going to be the night show, then we would see reports by now. But that backfield is already really crowded. And I know James Robinson has really taken a back seat at this point.
Yeah.
But if Knight wasn't placed above Robinson or Carter in the first place, that's no reason to buy all into the numbers that he put up over the weekend.
Don't overreact to one good game when that was the first fantasy points he'd had all season long.
Which is why he didn't make the list. But I wanted to touch on that first because I knew people would be like, how did you miss this? He's 2% owned.
Yeah.
Like he's 2% owned for a reason. To touch on Zay Jones a little bit more, I mean, if you're in a PPR league, you should be salivating at the mouth. He's had 68 and 145 over the last 2 weeks, but his target share is really what I want to focus on. He had 24 targets over the last 2 weeks, and it's not like he catches 3 of those balls. He caught 8 of 10 the first week and 11 of 14 last week.
Yep.
This is somebody that gets you buco fantasy points.
Yeah, for sure.
Tons of fantasy points. And lately, Zay Jones has been looked at as the number 1 over Christian Kirk. So I'm kind of buying into the Zay Jones hype right now. And that's why I would burn my waiver there. I don't like anybody on the tight ends. And I'll tell you, I was looking for somebody because I desperately need a tight end. I just can't find anybody to latch onto.
I looked and looked and looked and nothing felt good. I did throw Tyler Conklin on here. He's been up and down this year, but he still gets a lot of playing time. So you can still get some fantasy football points against the Vikings defense that's allowing quite a few points to tight ends this season. They're 9th most. So if you had to pick up somebody, but I really struggled to find any tight ends that I liked. I was like, well.
Yep. Let me go down this list real fast on the available tight ends that we have in the God Bless Fantasy Football League. It starts with Evan Engram, who is 40% owned, and he hasn't had more than 5.9 fantasy points over the last 3 weeks. Then it goes to Foster Moreau, who that team utilizes the tight end every now and then. And I'm a Darren Waller owner, so I know the feeling, but he's a touchdown or bust tight end. That is Foster Moreau. If he catches a touchdown, he gets you double-digit fantasy points. If he doesn't, you're looking at maybe around 5 fantasy points. Then it goes to Robert Tonyan, who he has been so hit or miss this season for the Green Bay Packers. Hunter Henry is next on the list, which I think he should be a lot better than he is. He had a chance to catch 2 touchdowns this past week, but he ended up only catching 1. But another touchdown or bust tight end. He's somebody that I'll look at to pick up just because they are playing. Did they play Miami last week, or did They played Minnesota last week. No, I'm looking to add him because he plays Arizona in 2 weeks, and then he has Las Vegas the week after for the first week of the playoffs, and then he has Miami. This is where I saw Miami at the very last week. And those defenses against the tight end, first, fourth, and third in that order. So I'm not looking to waste a waiver on him because to me it's just not worth losing a roster spot at this point. But, that's just kind of where we're sitting right now. So you look at some of those tight ends and nothing really gets you going. Tyler Higbee's also on this list. He's highly owned, but because of how the Rams are playing right now, there's reason to stay away.
I almost threw Juwan Johnson on here again, but then looking through his stats from the last game and realizing, so he was held without a catch for the second time all season. I mean, they just totally shut him down. And the matchup against Tampa Bay doesn't make you feel good. So I didn't put him on here.
So there you have it. There's a lot of names that we threw your way, but be cautious about burning your waiver this week. If you want to do it, go for it. That is my biggest piece of advice to everybody. Like, you don't have to listen to me as if I'm gospel. Like, go after it. Like, if you feel like that's the right move, trust your gut. Go for it because it may pay off, and then you can say I was wrong. I'm always willing for somebody to point out when I told you a wrong piece of advice. I did that today.
I'm wrong almost daily.
Before we go, though, I want to play a little something with Sasha, and then we'll bounce off here. I want you to tell us your best player on your team without using their name.
Okay. Let me look here.
And I'm going to make an example here.
Okay.
Because I know the direction some people would go just because you drafted a person high. So if you draft, say, Aaron Jones is the best player on your team, but because he hasn't had the best of season, Geno Smith could actually be the best player on your team. I want you to describe Geno Smith, not Aaron Jones. Don't
Their
just
play
base it
or
off
just like trying to get people to guess who it is.
Say that again.
Like how they play or just trying to get people to guess straight up who it is?
Just trying to get people to guess straight up who it is.
In the offseason, this player got made fun of for getting a lot of money because people thought that he was too dumb to be receiving more money.
Too dumb.
Got made fun of a lot in college for playing video games. Believe he made a comment in a press conference about video games.
I'm with you. Okay. Do you know who that is? We'll get to the answer here in a moment. Let me give you my best player on my team. This player is by far Mr. Touchdown. And he is somebody that if you had to compare him to a superhero would be the Incredible Hulk.
The Incredible Hulk? Can I pull up your roster? Because I don't even know who's on your team.
Yes, you can pull up my roster now.
Okay.
But in a standard league, he is Mr. Touchdown. And those fantasy points are what I look for all the time. All the time.
Looking. Sorry, this is really great podcast dead air here.
Hey, it's okay. I put up a very impromptu conversation here.
Who the hell on your team would you compare to the Incredible Hulk? Okay, are we guessing? You going first?
Yours is Kyler Murray.
Yes, it is. Christian McCaffrey?
No. Christian McCaffrey, I wouldn't call him the Incredible Hulk.
Why I was
He'd be more Captain America.
Okay. Are we going off of looks?
I was going just based on like sheer like body size and like bulk when I said the Incredible Hulk.
I honestly don't know.
Mr. Touchdown. Over 1,000 rushing yards already this year. 10 touchdowns through 12 weeks. On the ground, Derrick Henry.
Okay. I'm like, I didn't even look at Derrick Henry. I'm like, literally, my eyes skipped right past him. And I was like,
Now do you understand the Incredible Hulk
I do.
reference? Who's the best player on your team? Maybe play that game with some of your friends. It's always a fun one. Or send it in. Send us your description, and we'll try to guess your player via Hurrdat Sports, at Hurrdat Sports. Send us a DM. We'd love to hear from you. That's it for this edition of God Bless Fantasy Football. Good luck this week. We will be back for Sunday's episode to cue you in on who we like for the weekend, and we'll really get into detail with DFS plays too, because I feel like that's been most beneficial to our audience. For Sausha Durkan, Cam Broham, I'm Andrew Rogers. God bless you, and God bless Fantasy Football.